All right, awesome. What's up, everyone? I am Meg. We apologize for starting a little bit late. There was an event in here that ran a little bit late before us. But in general, plan on starting these at 7. That's when all the tutorials are going to start in the future. But I'm Meg. I'm a junior here at Northwestern, studying computer science. I make the Dillo Day app here, iOS app. I do some other iOS projects, and then I worked at Apple this past summer, and I'm working there again this summer. So iOS is my favorite platform, so to say. So I'm excited to teach you guys a little bit about it. So does everyone have Xcode installed on their computer? All right, some of our PC users don't. All of our Mac users have Xcode installed? Okay, awesome. That's the IDE that we're going to use today to do the iOS tutorial. So if everyone could go ahead and open up Xcode on their computer. If you don't have it open yet, you should see a screen like I have on mine, different projects on the right panel. But it'll say welcome to Xcode, and then you have an option to create a new Xcode project. And that's what we're gonna do today. So once you open up Xcode, go ahead and click on create a new Xcode project. And then the IDE will open, and we're gonna be prompted with what kind of application we wanna make. This is some extraneous options right now. So for our sake, we're gonna go ahead and click on single view application. That's the simplest application we can make. So we're gonna go hit next there, and then we are going to be prompted with what we're gonna want to call our product. See if I can figure this out. Can you guys hear me? Good, good, good. All right, good enough? Okay, so your product name is gonna be the name of your app, and that is what your app is gonna be called if you put it onto the App Store. So for our sake, we're gonna go ahead and call it My First App. For team, you should see an option for a personal team. Does everyone see that option on Xcode? Yeah? Okay, cool. Go ahead and select your personal team. That means that the app is just for our own use. We're not going to send it to the App Store or anything. We're just going to be able to download it onto our computer and then onto our own device. And then for your organization, you can go ahead and just write your name. This is a unique identifier that again distinguishes your application in the App Store. You'll usually see a company name underneath the underneath the name of the app. And this is what that would be. So go ahead and write your name right there. And then organization identifier is again a unique identifier that's used to identify the company that made the app. Traditionally, it's just in the form of com dot the name of your company. So mine is com.meggrassi. So go ahead and replace Meggrassi here with whatever your name is. The language that we're going to be writing in today is Swift. So select that from the prompt. And then the device is going to be the iPhone. Everyone, single view application. All right, cool. Everyone got these all filled out? Good to go? All right, let's dive in and start making our first app. I'm gonna go ahead and save this onto my desktop. You guys can save it wherever relevant. I suggest desktop because that's where I'll be saving all my files throughout the tutorial. So go ahead and click create right here. All right, cool. We are in our first application. So we can see right here on the left pane, we have a couple different files that Xcode went ahead and made for us because they're going to be essential to creating our application. The first of these is appdelegate.swift. So appdelegate is not something that we're going to mess with today, but pretty much it's a set of functions that are set aside to do different actions when certain things happen to our application. So for example, when our application enters the background, when the user terminates our application, some other ones, right when it loads, things like that. We can put some like very important methods inside these functions in order to, for example, save our data before the application closed. And the application will call these methods right when these tasks happen. That's a little bit beyond our scope today, so we're going to go ahead and go past that. We have a view controller.swift right here. Has anyone heard that term before? If you do any web development, you might have heard of it. I'm going to go ahead and use the whiteboard to explain this one. So as we can see, As we can see, in this method, or in this class, we have two methods that were already defined for us. View did load and did receive memory warning. So these are both methods that have to do with a certain view in iOS. So let's say I'll hold the microphone for this. Let's say we're looking at Facebook, for example. This is our little janky iPhone. And we have a view right here. It says Facebook, and then email, and password. So this is an example of a view, right? We have different text objects on it, potentially different colors. It's something that a user can interact with. So a view controller, like what we've pointed out here, is able to actually control this view. So a good graphical way to think about it is if we have a view controller, a view is, so to say, its child. And then every time that we interact with a view, such as Facebook, so let's say I go ahead and I type in my email right here, right? A view is able to send that information to the view controller. So we're going to call that user interaction. And then the view controller is able to then, in respect, update the view. So all of the data that is inputted into the view, all of the user interaction that is inputted into the view is sent to the view controller. That data is then analyzed, and then the view is subsequently updated. Does that make sense to everyone? So the view never handles any of the data. It's just what the user sees and what can interact with. The view controller is what actually handles that data and decides what's going to be on the screen. Might be a little bit complex now. Once we actually start making our application, it'll make a little bit more sense. So once again, this is the view controller that Xcode gave us. The next file that we're given is the main.storyboard. And once this loads up, zoom out a little bit. What shape does this look like? This is an iPhone screen. So one of the coolest things about Xcode is, as opposed to in other types of development, you can literally draw the view that you want the user to see using this module called the interface builder. And then we can actually work with that view itself rather than having to code syntactically what we want the view to look like. So we're going to work with this a little bit later. Assets.xc assets. This is where all images and other assets are stored that you want to use in your application. LaunchScreen.storyboard is very similar to main.storyboard. We can drag and drop elements onto the actual launch screen that you're going to see when you're opening up an iPhone application. And then info.plist is just some specific information relevant to our app. We're not going to mess with that today. Cool. So those are all of the files that Xcode gives us. So first thing that we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and open up main.storyboard. And I just talked a little bit about how this is like kind of a drag and drop interface, right? So you can think about almost like Microsoft Word or Sketch. You can literally drag shapes onto this, change the color, change the text size, things like that, and then be able to actually display that view on your iPhone. So that's pretty cool. So we're going to go ahead and start doing that. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit. And one more thing I want to mention too that happens with the storyboard. So if we click on this little yellow dot right here, this means that we're impacting the view controller. And as I just described, that handles the data, right? So we don't want to be dragging and dropping elements onto the view controller. That's not what that's for. So make sure whenever we're working with drag and drop, we have clicked on the white space, the negative space here, and we're working with the view itself. Make sure that yellow box is not highlighted. Cool. So first thing we're going to do is go ahead and drag on an element. So if we go over here to the right pane, and we can see down here on the bottom right, there are a bunch of different elements that we can drag onto our view. So the first thing that we're going to do, just so we can get some text on there, is we're going to go ahead and write in this little filtering box, label. And this will bring up a nice label. So go ahead, click on that, select it, and drag it over onto the view screen. It'll even give you some guidelines to be placing it into the center. And then we can go ahead, double click to edit it, and type in, we'll name it My First iOS Application. It'll be a little bit off center, that's okay. Cool, so now we have a label on our view. So we can go ahead and run this application now. So if we go up here, we can see the simulator that Xcode is suggesting that we run in. You can select any type of iPhone you want here or iPad, or you can also connect your own iPhone. We're not going to get in that today though. We're going to use the iPhone simulator. I prefer to run an iPhone 7. You guys can select whichever model you'd like. And then if we go ahead and click this play button right here, we'll see it's building our app, and now it's running our app on iPhone 7. It should come to the front. If it doesn't, it might be loading. And there we go. My first iOS application running on our simulator. Did everyone get that? We're going to take a pause right here. Was everyone able to run on the simulator and have this label show up? Please don't be shy. Raise your hand. We have some Hack Nights organizers that'll come around and make sure everything's going good. Diane. Did everyone get that? Yeah, sure. So it's right up here. You can select your appropriate simulator. For some reason, it ran mine in the plus. I don't know. Xcode also has a lot of bugs. That's something to keep in mind when you're coding on it. See, if I run in 6S, it'll probably be the right size. I think mine's just going to show up really big because I'm on the projector, actually. So just keep that in mind. Yours will probably be like this size of the screen if you're running in the iPhone 7. And then once we load up, all right, well, you guys already saw it. You guys got it working. It's taking too long to load anyway. So cool. We ran our first iPhone application. Give yourselves a round of applause. It's a pretty big deal. It's exciting stuff. All right, very cool. But we can still probably say it's a pretty boring application. We want a little bit more functionality, right? So we're going to go ahead and mess around with the colors of this first, figure out how we can make a really cool user interface using Xcode. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and, after clicking on our view, open up the attributes inspector. So that's this little caret right here. It's called the attributes inspector. And in it, we have a couple different options. Right here. This little caret right here in the utilities pane. And from the attributes inspector, we have a couple different options for how we can mess around with the UI this little bit. So first thing that we can do is go ahead and where it says background, we see it's a drab white. You can go ahead and I'm going to go ahead to the selection box right here. Go ahead and click on a different color. So I'm going to make mine yellow, which is pretty exciting. You guys can pick whatever color you'd like. And then we can change the background color of this view, which is pretty cool. Couple other things we can do is we can go ahead and edit this label. So being a stereotypical Apple engineer, I'm going to go ahead and change it to Helvetica New Light because I think it's a prettier font. And we can see that changes the font once I hit done. Or it should change the font. There we go. Very nice. Go ahead and hit done. We'll make it a little bit bigger so it's easier to see. I'll come off the page a little bit. That's okay. We can move it over. Yeah, so we have a couple different options for how we can change some UI elements here. Color, font, size, things like that. We can see when we hit run again, if it doesn't take forever. We have a nice yellow app with a different font. All right, cool. So we can see there's one issue though. It's not as obvious anymore because of this, because I moved it to the center, but clearly our label was not in the center, right? It's really hard for us to figure out exactly where to put it so that it's going to be on the center. And specifically, when we're actually making an application we want to push to the App Store, that app's going to be running on anything from an iPhone 4 to an iPhone 7 Plus, right? So those are going to have very different screen sizes. So Xcode actually has this concept called constraints that you can set on your labels on your different iOS elements in order to ensure that you're going to have a similar UI experience on every single type of device that your app will run. So the way that we set these constraints, we're just going to set some very basic constraints to make sure everything's centered, everything looks okay. The way that we do that is we're going to hit Control, touch the element that we want to add constraints to, and then we're going to drag to one of the 4 edges of the view in the storyboard. So I'm going to drag up to this top edge, and when I release, I'm going to be given 2 kind of important options. Do I want to set this constraint as vertical spacing to top layout guide? Now that's a very complicated way to say we want about this much room, or this much room between the label and the top in every single iPhone. We're going to go ahead and select that one, so we have a little bit of space. And then the other option that we're going to, or the other constraint that we're going to set is if we hit Control, select, and then drag to the side. That is not the option. Go ahead and do it to the top, actually. We're going to want to center it horizontally in the container. So that's going to make sure that regardless of what device we're using, our label is going to show up in the center. Was everyone able to set constraints? It's kind of a weird, yeah? What was that? It was vertical to top layout guide, I believe. Yeah, vertical spacing to top layout guide is the first one to set. Was everyone else able to set it? Cool. So we can go ahead and click play here one more time. This will, again, run our application. And we can see our label is nice and in the center. Very cool. All right, awesome. So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to take a break for a couple minutes and let you guys add some more labels to your application. So if everyone can go ahead and, on your own, add a label that just says your name. If you finish up, help the people around you. It's hard to remember sometimes where the elements can be found and how to drag them on and stuff like that. And then we'll be walking around and can help anyone who is stuck. And make sure you add constraints to that label as well. Sure, sure. So, Chris asked a question, what exactly did those constraints I set mean? So we can see if you control and drag to every edge, you can see the constraints that you set one more time. So I set vertical spacing to top layout guide and center horizontally in container. So these are a little expressive sentences, so to say. But what vertical spacing to top layout guide means is that I would approximate this as about 20 pixels, right? We're about 20 pixels from the very top of the view. And what vertical spacing to top layout guide means is that on every single device that this app runs on, this label is going to be 20 pixels from the top of the view. I don't think you can do it in the interface builder. All of this too, I should add, this is like a really cool tool that Xcode has. This is all possible writing Swift code as well. And you can actually make it a little bit more flexible with what you want to do. But this is a really good place to start because you can actually visually see what you're doing. The other constraint that we set was center horizontally in container. What this means is that once again on every single device, this label will be centered horizontally. So it will be exactly the same space from this side to this side in every single device. Was everyone able to add a label on their own? Did anyone have any trouble with that? Everyone was able to get it? Good? All right, very cool. Awesome. Okay, so we can go ahead and move on. So this is great. We're seeing a cool view, but we could do this with wireframing, right? So let's go ahead and let's add some functionality to this app. So first thing that we're going to do to add functionality is we're going to go ahead and add another element, and this is going to be a button. So we can go ahead and type into this search box once again, button. Grab this and drag it on to our view. I'm going to rename it to say Enter App. And for our HCI sake, we can go ahead and add constraints again. So go ahead and pull to the bottom, and we will say vertical spacing to bottom layout guide. That once again will set the number of pixels that will always be from the bottom. And then we can pull to the side, and once again, we're going to pull to the bottom again, actually, so we can have the prompt to center horizontally in the container. If you're ever not prompted with the right constraint when you're making your own app, just try to drag to another side of the view, and you'll probably get the constraint that you're looking for. Cool, so now we have this button, but what do we want the button to do? So if we go ahead and zoom out of here, we called this button Enter App, right? So we're gonna want to have another view and view controller that we can actually enter. So once again, in this element box, we're gonna write in view controller. And we're gonna actually be able to drag a view controller onto a storyboard, just as we would a button, a label, any other type of iOS element. So the functionality that we want to add to this button, though, is we want to actually enter into this view. So Xcode has a really neat shortcut for this. Just like we did with constraints, where we control, click, and dragged, we can do that coming from the button onto this view controller, and we can choose show as our segue. So I'm going to do that one more time. We're going to control, click, and drag from this button onto the next view controller, and then we're going to have to choose a certain type of segue that we want to show this view controller with, and we're just going to choose show. It's the most basic segue. And then that's going to actually allow us to, when we click on this button, this view controller, well, this view associated with this view controller is going to show up, as opposed to the view that we were looking at then. So we can go ahead and run from this point. once again, we see the label that we saw before and our button. And when I click Enter App, I get a blank view. A new view was shown next to, because we clicked on the button and we had created that segue. Was everyone able to get this? We're going to take a quick status check here. Was everyone able to add a segue to a new view? I see a couple nods. I'd like to see some more. Yeah? All right, awesome. Cool, cool. So we added a little functionality. Give yourselves a pat on the back. We're starting off making our first app. All right, cool. So now that we understand how to make the UI, how to add a couple iOS elements, and how to do some navigation, we can go ahead and get into the actual heart of the application we're going to make. So we're going to be doing a photo viewing app featuring some of our lovely Hack Nights organizers back in their prime when they looked real good. So first thing that we're going to do is go ahead and download the pictures that we're going to use for our photo taking app. So I'm going to go ahead and shout key that. So if you guys can go to shoutkey.com/every and let me know if the link doesn't work. Go to this URL right here, and then can you download a folder altogether on Dropbox? You have to download each individual. Go ahead and just select all these pictures, I guess. Oh, really? Oh, nice. Okay, cool. So go ahead and download these beautiful pictures. And they'll show up in a zip. And then we can go ahead and go back to our Xcode project. Now, does anyone remember, I talked about these files that Xcode gave us originally before. Does anyone remember the one that I said to put pictures in? Images and other assets? Emphasis on assets? Yeah, assets.xc assets. So what we're gonna plug in real quick. Cool. So what we're gonna do is go ahead and open up your Finder, and hopefully I don't have anything embarrassing in my downloads. We're gonna open up that zip file, and then we can go ahead and just drag these pictures into the left pane right here of XC assets. Drop those, and then we can see that those pictures have been loaded into Xcode. And the cool thing about this now is we can just reference these pictures by their name. So we can just call them Chris, Diane, Will, and Samon. All right, so now that we have these pictures, we can start making our application. So we can go ahead back to main.storyboard. And what we're going to do is we're going to have a few buttons for each of the organizers, and then each organizer will have their own view where we're going to demonstrate a photo. So what we're going to have to do is create a view for each of these organizers. So we're going to go ahead and just start with one. We'll pull a button on first. So pull this right onto here. We'll add constraints one more time. Vertical spacing to top layout guide again. And center horizontally in the container. We'll rename this button to checkout, Samon. And then we can go ahead and give him his own view controller. And just as we did with the last view, I'm going to pull this up here. We can control, click, and drag to create a segue to this next view. Everyone able to make another view controller, add a button, create a segue? All together? Okay, cool. So now we have to add the necessary asset to let us see Samon's beautiful picture from, I think, what, 2009? Something like that? Yeah. If we want to check that out. So the way that we do that in iOS is just as we added a label element, a button element, we're going to go ahead and add a UI image view element. We'll call it image view on Interface Builder. So we can go ahead and drag this into our view. So what a UI image view element allows us to do is create a frame where we can put an image in to fill that frame, and we will specify that image later in the code. But the element itself will allow us to give us, or will give us like the sizing, the constraints, the orientation on the user interface for this image. So just as we did with a label and with the button, we're going to go ahead and add some constraints. I'm going to go ahead and actually center this both ways, so centering it horizontally and centering it vertically. And we also have to change the size of this element to fit the size of the picture that we're going to use. So if I select this element, and then I actually go into the size inspector, I don't think I selected it correctly. There we go. I can specify the width and the height of this element. So I'm going to go ahead, you guys should do this too, is make the width 250 and the height 250. And that will give us a square image set in the center because of the constraints that we set. Cool. So now we're going to go ahead and tell the program exactly what image we want to put in this UI image view. So what we're going to do is we're going to have to create a view controller to tell this view what image we want to have in this UI image view. So we're going to go ahead and do that by going to File, New, File. We're going to click on Cocoa Touch class. This means any of the preset classes that iOS has previously defined, and one of those would be a view controller. Hit Next here. We have to decide a name for the class, so I'm going to call it Samon View Controller, and it'll be a subclass of View Controller, and it will once again be in Swift. Go ahead and hit Next, save it into the same place that the rest of the project is in, and then hit Create. Now this will create for us a specific view controller that's set aside for that view. What we have to do now on the interface builder, so go ahead and go back to main storyboard, is we're going to have to tell Xcode that this view controller should be associated with that file. So the way that we're going to do that is we're going to click on this yellow box, and we're going to go to the identity inspector, and we're going to tell Xcode that this class is going to be Samon VC. Was everyone able to find the identity inspector? Cool. If your class has been created correctly with the right name, Xcode should actually autofill with that class title. So then we know that we did it correctly. So we can go ahead and hit Enter, and now those classes are have been connected. So now one other cool thing that we can do in Xcode when we're trying to work with both the interface builder and its associated view control at the same time, which is what we're going to do right now, is we can go ahead and we can open up the assistant editor, and that's these two circles interweaving here. Go ahead and click on that, and it will actually know that Samon's view controller is what we want to be looking at, and it will pull it up right next to the UI view that we were just working with. So now we can see at the same time, we have Samon's view controller and our view. So now we're going to do something kind of cool. Well, I think it's pretty cool. we're going to go ahead and control drag from this UI image view into this code. Do it right before the, right after the class definition, right before the first method view did load. Let go, and we're going to create something called an outlet. We can call it same on image, and then hit enter. So what we just did is we created a variable that is going to be associated with this UI image view element, and then we can manipulate that variable in the view controller to tell the iOS app exactly which image or other attributes we want to have associated with this UI image view object. Does everyone get that? Yeah. Connecting the two? Let me. All right, cool. Anyone else not able to get the variable associated with the UI image view into their view controller? Everyone else get it? Don't be shy. Yeah? Do you have a question? Okay. We're gonna talk amongst yourselves. People have that. People around have it. Try to help them out. is make sure that you named your SameOn view controller when we created the file. We made sure it was a subclass of UI view controller. If it was not a subclass of UI view controller, then you have to delete the file and make another one. That was one of the biggest issues. One of the other biggest issues I heard is make sure that you clicked on this yellow box, and in the identity inspector, you changed the class right here to make sure that those two pieces were connected. Otherwise, Xcode has no way to know that those two pieces are connected. Third thing I heard is sometimes your assistant editor is a little imperfect, and it won't just pull up SameOn's view controller like it did for me. If that happens, just go over to the side where you can select any of these files and click and drag it right here to the top. That will make it appear as well. Will, did you have a question? You fixed it? All right, cool. Looks like we're good otherwise, so we can go ahead and start to tell Xcode what to actually do with this variable. So I mentioned this briefly before, and actually because we are done with creating that variable, we can go ahead, click on this inspector one more time, and go to the SameOn view controller just because it's a little bit easier to type when you can see all the code. And I mentioned this before that Xcode gave us two methods already with this view controller. View did load and did receive memory warning. Yeah, sure. Good? All right, cool. So we have these two methods. View did load and did receive memory warning. And what iOS does is that it will call these methods without our input on in any way. It will call view did load after the view has loaded. So that's a really good place to put anything where you're working with variables on the interface, where you want to be showing the user certain types of data. That's a really good place to be dealing with those variables because you know that it's going to be executed every single time the view did load. Not too early, not too late. The user's always going to see your change in the data if you put your variables in that method. Did receive memory warning is used a little bit less. It pretty much just means you're running out of memory and you should probably take some action. We're not going to deal with that today. I don't think I've ever dealt with that in any iOS app that I've ever made. So that's a little bit more of a niche method. But view did load is consistently used because you know it's going to be executed every single time your view is opened. So where do you guys think that we're gonna tell Xcode what image should be? What image we should assign to SameOn image? Where do you guys think? View did load. There we go. So what we're gonna do is in this method, we can go ahead and talk to that variable SameOn image. We'll get a little autocomplete there. We're gonna affect the image part of that. So .image means that we're dealing with the image of this UI image view object. And we're going to go ahead and say that that's equal to SameOn, which is what we defined previously in assets.xc assets. Actually, give us a little picture to tell us that we did it correctly. So now, if we go up and we hit run, we can go ahead and enter the app. We'll have a button to check out SameOn. And we have a beautiful picture of SameOn on our app. There we go. We made a functional iOS app. Guys, give yourself a round of applause. It's a pretty big deal. All right, so you guys saw we added 3 other pictures earlier, right? So now, let's see you guys do it. We went through SameOn's picture, and now we're going to have you guys add the other 3. So that's going to involve creating a button, creating a view controller, creating a segue to that view controller, adding a UI image view on that view controller, and then opening up the assistant editor and adding the variable and setting the variable name. Okay? So it's going to be the exact same process that we just did. We're going to have you guys try it out. We'll be walking around to answer questions just to get some practice in making a real iOS app. You got a question? We're leaving that picture up. pretty much done. What we're going to do is I know if you guys ran it, you probably saw these guys noticed in the front, you like can't get back. Once you get to a picture, you got to close out of the app. So we're going to go ahead and add a back button. This will be pretty easy based on all the info that we learned. So I'm just going to do it for Samons. We're going to go ahead and what do you guys think we're going to look for in the filter? Guess the name of the iOS element. Back button, yeah, there we go. We're going to get a button. Go ahead and pull that in. Add the constraints that we usually add. We can call the button go back. And just like we had previously added a segue to this new view, we can actually add segues as a two-way street. So we can go ahead and control, click, and drag from this go back button onto this view controller, let go, and once again add another segue. So when we go and run the app, we have a back button here, and we can go back to the other screen. All right, awesome job, guys. Thank you for coming to the first hack night. If you have any questions, I'll change the Facebook event to have my email in it. Feel free to email me with any iOS questions. Happy to help anyone. Yeah, cool. Thanks for coming. Grab more potbellies if you guys want, and we'll see you next week if you guys come. Oh, yeah. Diane, do you want to put your sign-up link on?